I think most people can agree that Highguard is a video game that released on Monday, the 26th of January. Beyond that, any other discussion around this game is probably going to involve an argument. Well, hello, my gaming brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am Jonathan, your host here at QuickBird Gaming, and I appreciate you tuning in for another episode of QuickBird News, where we talk about all the gaming news that's fit to cover from the past week. For this video, we're going to be talking about the news from the 25th to the 31st of January. And this week wasn't as busy as some. We didn't have as many big stories crop up, but there's a few things we can touch on. We have Ubisoft involved in some more shenanigans, which is nothing new for that company. We have the port of Dispatch going over to the Switch 2, which ran into a little flack there, and the possibility that Bethesda's latest IP is going to get a big overhaul. As is always the case, each story is time-stamped in the description box down below, so feel free to scroll down there, see us if you see a story that interests you, go ahead and jump to that. Before we talk about all that, we've got to talk about Highguard. All right, we'll get this circus on the road. Starting with this Eurogamer article from Tuesday the 27th, Highguard hits almost 100,000 concurrent PC players on launch, but struggles with early negative Steam reviews. This is just for backstory and to kind of lay this out chronologically for what happened this week. It says Highguard launched last night on Steam and quickly had an influx of players saddle up to try it out. It reached 97,000 players around 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, then steadily decreased as the night went on. You know, whether the game will see similar peaks throughout the week, it didn't. Or will even hit a new peak record this weekend, it won't. Remains to be seen. Okay, and then it says the game has received an influx of negative Steam reviews, currently mostly negative. Many have criticized the map size and 3v3 game format. Bear that in mind. So that's kind of what happened when this game launched. It shot through the roof and then immediately fell back to earth and has been doing so ever since. We'll flip over to this GameSpot article. This is from Wednesday the 28th. Highguard store page removes mention of Apex Legends and Titanfall. The Steam page no longer begins saying it's from the creators of Apex Legends and Titanfall. Developer Wildlight has updated the store pages for the newly released free-to-play shooter Highguard to remove mention of how the game was developed in part by people who also worked on these other games. When the Steam store page went up, the first line said, from the creators of Apex Legends and Titanfall. Today, the listing begins by describing the game itself. The first line now reads, Highguard is a PvP raid shooter where players will ride, fight, etc. Now, there's a lot of possibilities as to why this happened. It could be that the devs who are working at Wildlight, who are not part of the companies that own Apex Legends and Titanfall, they may have been asked to remove this for these reasons. But the optics of it was such that it fueled the fire around this game, and people were saying the developers were trying to dissociate themselves from the game. I think that's a little bit extreme, but this is where the internet goes when these things happen. They see something and they run with it. It's not helped by the fact that we skip over to this Game Rant article, and this is from Thursday the 29th. Highguard Twitch viewership has already cratered mere days after the launch. Despite a lot of viral intrigue, Highguard's Twitch viewership already seems to be drastically falling. Okay, after being the last game announced at the Game Awards, we've talked about that. Interest in the new free-to-play hero shooter seems to be dwindling fast. Okay, it's only been out since the 26th, been review bombed, and so on and so forth. Then let's get down to the Twitch viewership. And, woof. I mean, it essentially went from, peaking at all 350 to 400,000 players watching this game being played to down around 15,000. And that's a pretty catastrophic drop for the span of 4 days. Now, let's flip over to the Steam database real quick. You can see here it's showing a positive review score at around 41%. I checked the Steam page directly. That does seem about accurate. This game did start off at overwhelmingly negative with a score down in the 20s. It's slowly over the days moved up to mostly negative. And then either, I think it was earlier this morning, or maybe it was yesterday, it crossed over into 40% positive, which puts it in the mixed category, 40% positive reviews. So it has been gaining a little traction. I think as more players who play it and stick with it, and the initial wave of people who are angry about it have passed. Now it's getting a more moderate score. But here is the salient point. 12,000 in game. And if we look at the actual chart, you can see, started with 93, 97,000, the peak 5 days ago, and it has been down ever since. It did back up to 15,000 last night. It had 12,000 most of the day today. Had a little weekend boost, but I don't think that was all. And just for the record, there was the Twitch stats right now. You can see it's basically at the current moment at about 1% of what it was 4 days ago. There's nothing else to put it. It was at almost 20,000 earlier today, so it was about 5-6% max for the day. But these numbers are not good. Now, there is a little ray of hope here. I don't want to say it's all doom and gloom, because I'm going to go to this IGN article, and this is from yesterday, from Friday the 30th, as I'm making this video on Saturday night. 4 days after launch, Highguard gets a 5v5 limited time game mode to counter those 3v3 complaints. They've announced a 5v5 limited game time to all players starting today, running through the weekend. And chief among criticisms is the size of the map feels too big and empty for 3v3 competitive shooter. Okay? But some, and I would say many, based on the reviews I read, this showed up in almost every negative review. Thought a 4x4, 5x5, or even 3x3x3, I had heard 3x3x3x3, 4 teams of 3, would have been a better fit. Now, just days after launch, Highguard is a 5x5 mode, albeit for a few days, because I'm sure they're going to be evaluating it to see how it did with the data they get from the people playing it. And then IGN, in fairness, says, okay, they did introduce bug fix and so on, the patch, setting new features, and I saw some QoL features in the patch notes. While the addition of 5v5 should go some way to countering that feeling of emptiness in Highguard, it doesn't address complaints about resource gathering phase of each map, which involves what some are calling boring mining and loot farming. And I have to agree with that. I did a video yesterday where I talked about my own personal thoughts on Highguard, about what happened, where it is, and what it means for the industry. I don't want to repeat all that and get too much in depth. I'll link it down below if you want to check it out. And that's a unscripted video that's off the cuff, so it's prone to rambling. But I do agree with that. I do think that this game has some fundamental problems that they're just not going to be able to solve. I will say, though, that this is a step in the right direction, that they are listening to their players and they are listening to their customers. Is it going to be too late? I don't know. I guess we'll see. But that's kind of what's happened with Highguard this week. That's kind of the state that it's in. Let me flip back to the SteamDB. And that's kind of where it is. I wouldn't say it's dead and buried, but it's got one foot in the grave and the other on the banana peel. This is a free-to-play game. They've got to have a player base because they need people buying cosmetics, battle passes, and these types of things to survive. They have no other way to bring money in because they're not charging for the game. So they've got to have a player base to do this, and if they don't get it back, I don't see how the game can survive in the long term. That's unfortunate for the people who like it, but it's just the reality, unfortunately. Okay, this is not directly related to Highguard. It is kind of a spin-off issue, but I did want to talk about these 2 articles from PC Games In, one from Wednesday the 28th, the other from Friday the 30th of January. And this first one from the 28th reads, Larian boss is sick of players shitting on new games, and it feels like he's talking about Highguard. The article opens up with the author saying that their Twitter feed or X feed is a battleground between people who love and hate the game and so on. And then she says that's where Larian boss Sven Vinky comes in. He says he's sick of people shitting on new games, and while he doesn't mention Highguard specifically, that definitely feels like the thread's inspiration. I don't like people shitting on things others have created. Putting something into the world makes you vulnerable. That alone deserves respect, even if you dislike the creation. It's easy to destroy things. It's a lot harder to build them, and so on. Then he says this, sometimes I think it'd be a good idea for critics to be scored, Metacritic style, based on how others evaluate their criticism. I'd like to imagine it would encourage a little bit more restraint. It wouldn't. You would end up with a case of the critics criticizing the game, the other critics criticizing those critics, a third group of critics criticizing the other critics, and you would just end up in this enormous death spiral of people just screaming at each other even more. Okay, he goes on and he talks, and he's basically, as he talks about this, he's basically making an appeal for people to be kinder and gentler in their criticism. And, that people's feelings are going to get hurt and so on. And the article says, while most people agree that being cruel or criticizing work in bad faith is unhelpful, his comments have proven somewhat divisive. Someone says, this is true until money gets involved, then it's not, quote, putting something in the world. It's charging for a product and the customer has every right to run it through the ringer. Venky then added an addendum to his thread, noting, it needs to be said, apparently, but I don't like developers or publishers shitting on players either. Yeah, it absolutely does need to be said, because there is a wide swath of developers that absolutely take great delight in crapping on gamers, calling out gamers as a whole, wanting to punch them in the face, certain segments of the gaming population, and are very vitriolic, very hostile, very contemptuous, and very dismissive. How many years has it been since that guy at Ubisoft said players need to get used to not owning their own games? That single line probably did more damage to Ubisoft and player and developer relations than anything else in the last 5 years. It's to the point now where it's still being referenced routinely in comment sections about Ubisoft and about games in general. It is not, I mean, and that was just a behind the curtain peek at what these people really think of us, the players. Like I said, the sneering contempt from developers is what's got us here. That and overly priced, badly written, badly optimized, buggy, crashing games that are constant, that basically the players act as people who are paying to be beta testers for games that aren't working. Nostalgia is being milked with little being delivered, lazy asset flips, over monetization, over microtransactions. The player frustration is palpable, especially at a time when we don't have the same kind of disposable income we had 20 years ago. None of us do, or few of us do, and it's an issue. You know, this guy writes, you know, it's true until money's involved. I absolutely agree that is the case. And I know that Sven Venky is trying to take the let's all calm down. Everybody calm down.
Please proceed calmly to the lifeboats located in the main hallways. Please stay calm!
I don't think that's going to work at this point. Now, I'll give him credit. He did come back in the second article, this was from the Friday the 30th, said he will weigh his words more carefully and say, I was genuinely trying to make a constructive argument, but phrased it poorly. It's been bugging me, so let me try again. I don't have an issue with criticism. My point was it doesn't need to be hurtful. And he had deleted the post about scoring people Metacritic style based on how their review, people evaluate their criticism. And he goes on, and I know where he's coming from. I don't think he was literally attacking gamers, even though some people took it that way. I think the guy is just asking for a more civil discourse around games. I just don't think he's going to get it at this point. I think there are too many, the battle lines have been drawn, there's too much division, and this is, not just in the gaming community, but in our society writ large. There's too much division, there's too much anger, and there's too much frustration. I think you're going to continue to see strong reactions out of gamers when something's put forward asking for our money that is not, meeting standards. So I'm glad he made the comments, but I just don't think it's going to get the result he wants. Okay, we're going to turn away from Highguard and look at some other stories. I would like to start with this Eurogamer article that was published on Saturday the 31st of January. Dispatch Studio apologizes if it looks like it was trying to hide the censored Switch content disclaimer. A lot of lessons to be learned here. They said they issued a statement insisting it was not trying to hide their disclaimer about censored content on Switch, but did admit it put the notice in the worst spot on the eShop. Earlier this week, Dispatch released on the Switch consoles. However, many were disappointed to learn the explicit content censorship would be implemented. As we reported at the time, this meant black boxes would conceal explicit graphics and the passionate noises would be toned down. So as we scroll down through this, Ad Hoc just kind of says, we wanted to put the disclaimer out there so people could see it. We need to take full ownership of the placement of this disclaimer. While we didn't have complete control of the language, we did have control of its placement. It was our intent to go out of the way to tell people looking to buy the game the content was censored, wires got crossed. We put this in the wrong section, and we didn't catch this till after the launch when we saw people were saying we should have called out the changes on the store page. We went to make sure it was there. It has been the entire time, just in the absolute worst spot. It looks like we were trying to hide it. Now they go on to flagellate themselves a little bit over this. I doubt they were really trying to hide this from people, but people who bought the game or pre-ordered it were understandably upset that they were getting a censored version they weren't aware of. It should have been, in their opinion, and in ad hocs, the way they phrase it, it should have been more prominent that this was reported. So I don't want to get too deep into the nuts and bolts about censorship. I believe adults should be able to consume any legal content that they choose to consume. And this is more perplexing based on the fact that games like Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk, which have a lot of TNA and a lot of sexual situations in them, are available uncensored on the Switch. But this is just Nintendo. So and screw them. I don't really care about them. I hope the gamers can resolve this and the people who are upset are able to get their money back. I hope that ad hoc takes the lessons away from this. I don't think they were doing anything capricious. It was just an error and they learned from it. And the situation gets resolved for people who wanted to experience the game the way they wanted to experience it. At this point, talking about Ubisoft is like being a physician entering a waiting room to tell a group of people that their family member has cancer. It is emotionally draining. I've got a couple articles here I want to talk about. We're going to start with this one from Video Games Chronicle from Friday the 30th. Director assures Ubisoft remains committed to Beyond Good and Evil 2 despite the recent upheaval. And the creative director of Ubisoft's long in development BGE2 has spoken for the first time since the company's reset, reassuring that the development of the game is progressing. Last week, the Assassin's Creed publisher announced a significant organizational restructuring, which we talked about in last week's Quick Bird News, which will see its development team split into autonomous creative houses. One of those houses was confirmed to include BGE2, the game that's now been in development in some form for nearly 20 years. Its inclusion came as a surprise to some since Ubisoft had been somewhat ruthless with the decision to cancel 6 games, including The Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. However, the creative director has now commented on BGE2's status, reassuring that its development team, quote, remains committed and focused to delivering a remarkable game for our players to enjoy. When? In another 20 years? I mean, I'm in my 50s. Am I going to be dead before this game comes out? This is absurd because the game you started making 20 years ago, based on the graphics engines and the hardware at the time, is nowhere near what it is now. And I mean, I don't even know how you would use anything other than just like basic conceptual artwork from that time that would have any bearing on a game that you're trying to make for today. And there's still no real, there's still no clue as to when this game is going to come out. We've seen nothing. So weird. I go to this DualShockers article from Thursday the 29th. Excuse me. Ubisoft devs call Assassin's Creed Invictus ridiculous. Okay, while most of the experiences in Assassin's Creed are told through single-player narratives, there was a time when the franchise dabbled with PvP and PvE multiplayer, with games playing as Templars training in the Animus against one another in Brotherhood and Black Flag. AC Unity is the last time multiplayer was available in a mainline Assassin's Creed title. Okay, rumors and leaks have suggested Ubisoft is working on a new AC game dedicated solely to multiplayer called Codename Invictus. However, recent alleged remarks from an anonymous developer have portrayed the upcoming multiplayer title in an unappealing light, with only managers and higher-ups seeing any value in the product. And I will reiterate, this is anonymous, so this is alleged. But you know what? Given the fact that, given Ubisoft's track record, I have no problem believing that any of this is true. Assassin's Creed Invictus was first revealed to the public in 2022 following an interview with Vice President and Executive Producer for Assassin's Creed, Mark Alexis Cote. Now, excuse me, stop me if I'm wrong, but isn't this the same guy that's not only no longer with the company, but is actively suing Ubisoft right now? I'll flash up an article here if I can find it. But rumors and supposed leaks came forward suggesting Invictus would be tied with Assassin's Creed Infinity, now known as the Animus Hub. 16-player PvP Battle Royale-like matches, which was supported by multiple AC voice actors, teasing their return on unknown projects. Okay? No information about Invictus has ever been revealed, but according to French YouTuber Jonathan, no relation, an anonymous Ubisoft developer told him Invictus will play similarly to Fall Guys, and that most developers working on it dislike the game. No, I did not misread that. I don't know a single colleague who likes Invictus, said the anonymous developer. Only the managers will probably keep smiling and singing the praises of this project. It's awful, ridiculous animations, hideous and cartoonish characters. Their faces are just as awful. And bear in mind, Assassin's Creed has a history of screwing up rendering faces. This has been an issue in the franchise in the past. Idiotic sound and visual effect combat in arenas. The concept is just plain dismaying. Jonathan later clarified on X that Invictus currently looks more similar to Fortnite than traditional AC games, is scheduled to launch in 2027, though that release window, may be subject to cancellation, etc. Who the fuck asked for this? Who wants this out of Assassin's Creed? It is a franchise that has built its history on single-player gaming. Who is asking for a battle royale for this? I talked about this last week. I don't think this is the same article, but it's the same sentiment. This article from the 21st from Insider Gaming. Ubisoft's new model will focus on open world adventures and games as a service native experiences. So in other words, they're going to continue to create open worlds that are half empty and monetize with cosmetics and DLCs and just nickel and dime you to death. Basically, in other words, what they're doing right now. And then you go back to this article and the devs are saying, we hate this, but the managers are all happy. Why? Because they're probably looking forward to that monetization. Big bonuses if they can get that to work. I am not, in this video, saying that the Guillemot family, who owns Ubisoft and has been running it for years, is actively trying to destroy the company, to devalue it to the point that they can sell it off to Tencent, who already owns a stake in the franchises, or somebody else, so that they can make a whole lot of money, get a golden parachute at the expense of thousands of workers being laid off or downsized. I am not accusing them of that. That is not what I'm saying. But if they were, would they be doing anything different? Okay, moving on from that tire fire. This story is on Insider Gaming, and it was posted on Monday the 26th, but this story has been kicking around for a little bit now. Starfield 2.0 could be real after all. A new mention of Starfield 2.0 is leading fans to believe the update is real. Of course, though, there's no word on when it might be released. We have heard about Starfield getting a new update and a DLC several times in 2025 without any kind of concrete release information. We've seen Bethesda mention it a third time a few months ago and saw a tease. No concrete details have been shared. The latest mention comes from the popular Defining Duke podcast with co-host Mr. Matty Plays, who claims he saw it behind closed doors. When talking about Starfield 2.0's upcoming update with guest Gene Part, Matty started by saying the way Bethesda's handling 2.0 is weird. He confirmed that he saw it behind closed doors, but he can't say anything else other than that he saw it. No concrete details have been revealed. Some information has been shared in a previous report. It seems the game's spaceflight mechanics will step away from loading screens to a more freeform and continuous traversal. The creation system has been enhanced for better spaceflight and future-proof for upcoming titles, whatever that means. Additionally, Starfield 2.0 update will bring the long-anticipated PS5 and Switch 2 ports. The developer is optimizing the title for low-power devices like handhelds. Okay. So none of this has been officially confirmed, but this information is out there. I know a lot of people who really, have a love-hate relationship with Bethesda, myself included. They love the games, they love the universes and the franchises, but they hate the way the developer handles this. They hate the way the games are broken. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I've made no secret of the fact that I love Fallout, but the games do have their issues. There's just no denying it. And I think for Bethesda, this might be a way for them to recoup some goodwill if they can manage it and get people invested back in the game. They've not done well. Starfield, though it sold a ton, I think it's sitting in mixed reviews on Steam. Its overall was perceived to be pretty middling, if not poor, and boring. Just a lot of dead time in between. Fallout 76 had its own share of problems, was seen as a cash grab back when it released. And even though a lot of people loved Fallout 4 and Skyrim, and they're still being played by tens of thousands of people even today, 10 and 15 years after they've released, they did not sit well with all the hardcore fans of the franchises for various reasons. So Bethesda's been kind of on a downward trajectory for over 10 years. If they could recoup Starfield and get it to where it's a more viable title, and maybe make a franchise something that people would be looking forward to again. I didn't even mention the fact that their DLC came out, which was absolutely terrible and nobody liked for the game. They could maybe start to slowly turn the ship around. They got some goodwill with the Oblivion remaster that dropped last year, and they need to keep that going. So, no idea if this will matter. I would retain all the, caution about it and not get too worked up. But if it comes out, give it a fair chance to see if they can improve it. It's not going to get any worse than it is now. So I guess we'll see what happens, but it's something to keep an eye on. All right, I'm going to wrap up with this article just because I thought it was interesting. This comes from IGN from Tuesday, the 27th. UK court rules that stealing RuneScape gold is criminal theft in a case that could have wider repercussions for the video game industry. A UK court has ruled that the unauthorized stealing of in-game currency can legally be classified as criminal threat. Former Jagex developer Andrew Lakeman was charged with allegedly stealing 700 billion gold from almost 70 RuneScape players, with a real-world value of over £500,000, equivalent of about $750,000. He then sold this currency online to Bitcoin. Lakeman had no access to player accounts in his position as a content developer. He allegedly accessed them by using credentials of members of the account recovery team. Stole 68 players starting around 2018. And it gets down to the legal details of this, but kind of the upshot is that the court says these are things that it doesn't matter that they're digital only, these are things that have tangible value, so it is still theft. I mean, technically Bitcoin doesn't exist in any physical sense, and it has tangible value as well. So I think this is interesting. Now, I do not expect to see a slew of people being sent to prison for hacking and stealing WoW accounts or anything of that sort. I don't think that's the case. It is interesting to me, though, that, we're seeing more and more digital assets just existing in the world. And, here's another example of it. And I think it's kind of interesting that even if I don't expect to see a bunch of people going to jail for stealing money, it seems like it's possible. So, just like I said, something that I thought was kind of interesting. And since it was related to the games industry, and there weren't a lot of other stories this week, I thought I'd mention it. All right, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to put this one to bed. I thank you for tuning in. If you did enjoy this, please consider doing the YouTube stuff. Drop a like on the video. Leave a comment down below if you think I missed a major story this week. If you agreed or disagreed with anything I covered, that's fine. Either way, I do just love the discourse around games. I do read all comments. I try to answer as many as possible, so let me know what you think. And if you are willing to give me your subscription, I would love to have that. It's just one click. It helps me out a whole bunch, so I thank you in advance for that. I will be back next week with more QuickBird news, and we'll see what the industry has in store for us this week coming up. I'm sure there'll be some twists and turns. So anyway, until then, I appreciate you tuning in for this episode. Thank you once again. You all go out there, you live your best lives, and you all stay gaming.